not even signed in. Okay, so thank you for joining us today on Kerberos Roundtable Discussions. Today we're going to talk about the movement to get Jesse Ventura to run. Now, I did another video where I said he's not running, but circumstances have kind of changed. It's a very weird situation. So this is a movement to get him to run, similar to the movement that got Eisenhower to run, to draft a public citizen to run. So we're going to take a look at what Jesse just said on July 31st, 2020 about the movement.
But it appears that I still might be a factor because there's something happening on the internet, and I was made aware of it and I agree with it, that this election is going to be won and lost on the internet. There's a movement out there to elect me. They just took out a full-page ad in the White Bear paper telling me that this is happening and warning me to be ready to go. And so I don't know what's going to develop out of this thing, but here's my message. If I were to get in this race, my message would be simple. We need an independent right now, because if Biden gets elected or Trump gets reelected, the polarization is going to continue and it's going to get worse. The only way out of this is to have the two gangs, and I refer to them as gangs, get a common enemy. And that's what I was in Minnesota.
Okay, so Brad, if you could send me the link so I could post it. We're live. I don't think anyone's. Okay, so we're going to take a look. There was an ad that we looked at in our last video, but they've since updated the ad. So you could look at the ad that says updated. They're updated.
And I'll tell you something else honestly. Before I put my butt on the line, this country better show me it's worth it. We gotta think revolutionary. You gotta be ready to elect Che Guevara. Because I will change things if I won. We need a single-payer, government-run health care. It's a human right. If you're sick, you should be able to go to the doctor. If we weren't spending all our money on these wars, we could have health care 3 times over. Health should not be for profit. I would start a war on the climate and a war on pollution. I'm watching the oceans die before my very eyes. I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. If the oceans die, we die. If we guarantee we get out of wars, the result will be free college. The state of our country today, we're in a mess. And who is to blame? The Democrats and the Republicans. They have been in charge for my entire life. Stop voting for Democrats and Republicans. We must, this election, elect an independent. Will you agree we're polarized? The worst we've been probably since the Civil War, I would imagine. If you elect Trump or Biden, the polarization continues and nothing changes. There's always that patriotic voice saying to me, if not you, then who? If they got the frickin' guts to let me in a debate, I'll come in and destroy their 2 candidates and steal the election in November, just like I did in Minnesota.
Ventura being declared the winner. First he was Jesse the Body Ventura, then he was Jesse the Mind, and now he's Jesse the Governor.
If I were to get in this race, my message would be simple. We need an independent right now, because if Biden gets elected or Trump gets reelected, the polarization is going to continue and it's going to get worse.
Okay, so we're going to take a look. Stop the video for a second. We're going to take a look at the Google Doc I sent you. If you could pull that up, there's a letter that they took out and they wrote him. We're going to take a look at that letter. So, text I'm able to read it up. Yeah, Governor, this is an ad they took out in his local paper. It says, because he does not use the internet. You can make it bigger. I can't read it. Okay. Governor Ventura facing a time of, make it a little bigger. Facing a time of unprecedented environmental and medical crisis, our government has shown itself unwilling and unprepared to help those most affected by events. Can you make it bigger, Brett? That's fine. Instead, the government has proven to be the enemy of our citizens and the world at large, eradicating our rights while killing our friends and neighbors. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Most are unable to pay for medical care. Ordinarily, let alone during this pandemic, millions have gone from living paycheck to paycheck to fearing eviction and starvation with no end in sight. The problems were collectively are that's like the problems we collectively face are so grave, so desperate, they must be addressed immediately. Change must come this election. Only hope is an independent who speaks truth to power. There has been there's never been a more perfect time to end this madness and take the country back into the hands of the people. The political revolution is here, and we're drafting now. Drafting you, Governor Jesse Ventura, lead us to victory. You put out the call. Before I put my butt on the line, this country better show me it's worth it. We heard you. The people are answering. Millions nationwide. The numbers ever rising. Scroll. We are here to prove to you the people are absolutely worth it. The thousands of courageous mothers joining arms in Portland, singing like a lullaby, hands up, please don't shoot, while facing militia armed with weapons of war. The thousands of fathers, brothers, and uncles wielding leaf blowers to push back the tear gas. The veterans now upholding their oath to protect against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. As they stand together in the front lines, they prove that we're worth it. Millions of protesters standing up, revolting against tyranny, who've continued to fight despite facing rubber bullets, beatings, and tear gas, as well as the threat of permanent injury and kidnapping in unmarked vans. They prove we're worth it. The millions of students with no hope on the horizon, now inheriting a broken world. They are confusing the reality that they are having children may no longer be morally justifiable. Okay, scroll. That they may not have even seen. That their own lives reach a natural end. They are worth it. And we a mighty growing team of hundreds of volunteers, Americans from all walks of life that have spent the last 12 weeks working 14 to 18-hour days, diligently building an upwell of support and a path to the White House. For you, Governor, we are showing you that it's worth it. In 2016, as the world watched, you promised Joe Rogan that if the situation got worse, you would run in 2020. Now, each passing day of our country drifts further into chaos. A lethal virus runs rampant. Martial law lurks. War is in our streets. We are a country without leadership. Governor, the time is now. Neither Trump nor Biden stand a chance against you. You know this. We all know this. A majority of people plan to vote against a candidate rather than vote for one they believe in. They deserve a real choice. Governor, you polled at 18% without a campaign. A massive 40% of the electorate is already registered independent, rather than Democrat or Republican. Gallup, with you in the race, these voters will actually have a real option. There is a wide open lane for the American people to win this election with you at the helm. Run for office and work with us to unite the country. You can do it alone. You can't do it alone, and we can't do it without a true leader. We must take our country back from the corrupt money elite who have too long denied the American people any true representation in Washington. If not us, then who? If not now, then when? Together, let's change the course of history. Governor, your country desperately needs you. We desperately need you. Answer our call, we the people of the United States. So we're going to take a look at the new ad that they put out. Yeah.
The state of our country today, we're in a mess. And who is to blame? The Democrats and the Republicans.
The virus here in the U.S. now approaching 160,000 deaths.
People need to understand this pandemic is a war and it should be fought that way, and the leadership in Washington is horrific. If the United States goes to war, which we have to against this pandemic, it has to be a United States of America.
The Dow collapsing around 1,900 points today. Its worst single-day loss ever.
Nearly 50 million people have lost their jobs over the last 14 weeks.
And in terms of the contraction in GDP, the largest drop in American history.
Mr. President, are you prepared to use the military against U.S. citizens?
Press, let's go. Press, let's go. Come on.
What you're seeing now is definite practice towards martial law by sending federal troops in when they're not being asked by the local government or the state government.
And look, the idea that there's going to be this revolution, Americans aren't looking for revolution.
We got to think revolutionary. You got to be ready to elect Che Guevara. Because I will change things if I won. If I were to get in this race, my message would be simple. We need an independent right now, because if Biden gets elected or Trump gets reelected, the polarization is going to continue and it's going to get worse.
I'm running for president. Since there's no candidate out there that satisfies my personal need, then I will be writing myself in. If America writes me in and I win, I'll do the job.
But it appears that it still might be a...
We are okay. So we're gonna take a look at the other link I sent you, where we look at learn a little bit more about this. So on the issues. So we looked at that video. Let's scroll down a little bit. A little bit more. More. Keep going. I'll let you know. Oh, go up where it says. Go to where it says Jesse Ventura is not for sale. We're gonna take a look at that one.
Mr. Jesse Ventura, Minnesota campaign finance reform.
First of all, you lead by example. Jesse Ventura accepts no PAC money whatsoever. Jesse Ventura is not owned by special interest groups. My two opponents can't say that. They're not leading by example. They're going out there. They're not setting an example to reform campaign finance. They're exploiting it for what it is today. November 3rd is no longer an election. It's an auction to the highest bidder, and that's what you have happening today in the world of politics with the professional politicians from both parties.
Going to keep going a little bit more. Take a look at the second. We're gonna look at the Second Amendment. Second Amendment, it says.
What could we do to control the mass shootings that have been happening? That's the gorilla in the room, isn't it? The 300-pound, 3,000-pound gorilla. Because always remember this, I have a gun safe at home, and never in my life have I come home and found those guns misbehaving. I've never walked in and heard them going off. I never walked in, nothing, because there's something required. It's called a human being that has to pull the trigger. And what can we do about it? Well, I was governor when Columbine happened, and I took a great deal of heat when I made the statement that had there been a legit conceal and carry in that building, lives could have been saved. And let me make this statement. Do we care more about our money or our kids? Well, the natural answer is, of course, our kids. But the reality answer isn't that, because isn't there an armed guard in every bank? And yet the schools have no one to protect them. Guns are banned at schools. There's nobody there to protect the kids. Now, going to my training in the Navy SEALs, we were trained to think like the enemy. If I were a terrorist, and this is terrorism, this is, terrorism in our country happening here, of course I'd hit a school. There's nobody there to stop me for 20 minutes. Now, I gave the solution 15 years ago. Nobody abided by it. And yet, how many schools have been attacked since Columbine? A lot. You've got law enforcement, retired people out there, and retired military special forces guys out there that are phenomenal with weapons. You hire one as a janitor. He wears 2 hats. The kids in school know him as Bob the janitor. He sweeps the floor. He does all the things the janitor does. But Bob is carrying concealed weapon on him for protection of that school. Kids don't need to know about it, only the principal. Then at least you've got somebody on site who can provide protection if some psycho decides they want to go and commit mass murder. Well, you may not get him before he does it, but you might save some lives. Now, I know people are going to say, oh, you're saying to solve guns with guns. Well, sometimes that's the way it has to be done. And taking guns from honest people is not the answer. Because as the cliche goes, then only the bad guys got them. Because they're not giving them up. Now, should you stop the loopholes at these gun things? Of course. Of course. When I went for conceal and carry in Minnesota, shall issue. What's required? Background check. Gun safety course. You have to go to the range and prove you can hit what you aim at. Taking guns from law-abiding citizens is not going to stop what's happening.
Now we're going to see what else he has to say by looking at a few of them on some other issues. Let's look at maximum wage.
Wealth distribution is completely out of line today. In fact, people have talked to me about the minimum wage, and I've shocked people and said, maybe what we ought to have is a maximum wage. If somebody makes $100 million a year, that's not enough. What could you possibly need if you made $100 million every year? And the case in point, the Walton family, right, that owns Walmart. Each member of that family makes billions of dollars a year, and yet their employees have to be government subsidized by we the taxpayers because they don't earn enough to not be subsidized. Something is gravely wrong with that. My position on that is if you work a 40-hour work week, I don't give a damn what the job is. If you work 40 hours a week, you should get paid enough money so that you do not require any government subsidy at all. Now, how you determine that or what that number is, we got to figure it out. But to me, if you work 40 hours a week shining shoes, washing dishes, whatever that might be, you should earn a living to where we, the government and the taxpayers, should not have to be subsidizing you.
Take a look at a couple more of his interesting opinions. Well, I'm gonna look at another one, and then I'm gonna talk about. I'm gonna look at one more of them, and then I'm gonna talk about all three. I'm gonna do them in groups of three, so I don't just keep taking breaks. Scroll. Well, we're going to do three at a time. I don't know, pick one. I don't care which one. Okay, pick. I don't know. Do the war on drugs one. That's a good one. Oh, do that. All right.
A wise man said, what?
No, do the war on drugs. That's probably shorter.
Let's go to my vigilant producer, Alex Logan, in the command center. Alex, what do you got on the war on drugs?
All right, well, let's start with the first Democratic presidential debate, where the candidates were asked about the upcoming Nevada marijuana legalization initiative being voted on next November.
You said you smoked marijuana twice, didn't quite work for you. If you were a Nevada resident, how would you vote?
I suspect I would vote yes. And I would vote yes because I am seeing in this country too many lives being destroyed for nonviolent offenses.
While Hillary Clinton would vote against the initiative, stating,
I do support the use of medical marijuana, and I think even there we need to do a lot more research so that we know exactly how we're going to help people for whom medical marijuana provides relief.
Where do you stand on the governor? Is it time to legalize it?
Absolutely, and that's Hillary Clinton doing the best two-step dance routine I've ever heard. That's the old standard answer. We need to study it more. They've been studying it now for decades. No more study needs to go out on it. We know that medical marijuana works for seizures and epilepsy. We know medical marijuana works for cancer. They're now even finding out it causes tumors to disappear, all sorts of stuff like that. It's endless. What else is marijuana good for? Clothing. You can make clothes out of marijuana. Rope. And do you know what else? Biodiesel fuel. Marijuana can make us independent of energy from foreign countries if we were to decriminalize it, grow it, and use it to the full extent of the plant. You know, Willie Nelson does more than smoke it. He drives it in all his tour buses. He walks the walk and talks the talk when it comes to marijuana. It is ridiculous, and for Hillary Clinton to take that two-step, well, I think we need to study it some more. We've been studying it for 50 years, Hillary. The jury's back. Medical marijuana is good, and recreational marijuana is good also. By the way, for Hillary and all them out there, while they're having their martinis, 88,000 people last year died from the use of alcohol in some way, shape, or form.
Well, we did the research for the former Secretary of State ourselves, and we ran the numbers. Here's what we found in this edition of the Money Trail. The war on drugs continues to wage on, and America's left with the bill. According to drugpolicy.org, the U.S. spends more than $51 billion annually to fight the war on drugs. There are about 346,605 people serving sentences in state and federal prison for drug possession or sales in the United States. And on average, it costs $25,251 to incarcerate a federal prisoner for 1 year. That's nearly $9 billion wasted per year on incarcerating a mental health issue.
Exactly. And I saw the first results. I have friends that live close to me down off the grid in Mexico, and they happen to be from the state of Washington, who is legalized now, marijuana. The first result, they saw their state judicial budget drop 15%. That's mammoth. A 15% drop in their state's judicial budget simply because they're not prosecuting marijuana anymore.
And so not only are we wasting money, but we're also wasting time and resources. A research study found that during the span of 11 years, the NYPD alone made a total of 439,056 possession-only arrests. Multiplied by 2.5 hours of police time per arrest, that equals just over 1 million hours of police officer time to make 440,000 marijuana arrests. That is the equivalent of having 31 police officers working 8 hours a day, 365 days a year for 11 years making only marijuana possession arrests.
That's absurd. You know, Republicans talk about us paying too much in taxes. How come they don't use this as an example? And for all of you religious people out there, right? Didn't God make it? If you believe God created everything on this planet and he created it for us to use, then God made marijuana. At what point will we bust God? Shouldn't God do his time for making it?
Whether we put God behind bars or not, Jesse, I mean, how do we let this quote-unquote war continue when it's clearly bleeding this country dry?
Well, you need to elect the right people. You need to elect people in government who truly want to reduce government, who truly want you to pay less taxes for common sense things. The war on drugs is happening because clearly Democrats and Republicans are getting paid off to keep this war going. Somebody's making money. Always follow the money. So somebody in high places is making money off the war on drugs.
Well, let's talk about how much we could stand to make off of this if we were to legalize and tax them. I mean, this is the most frustrating part about all of it. If California alone legalized only marijuana, they would see a tax revenue increase of $1.4 billion. If we were able to tax it at a comparable level to alcohol and tobacco, nationwide tax revenue would equal $46.7 billion.
So we're kicking away $46 billion, spending $51 billion, right? So that's nearly $100 billion of waste every year in the United States of America on the war on drugs.
And you take into account all the, putting prisoners,
We're going to stop the
prison
video here and I'm
time,
going to
cops.
comment on what he said. Sure. All right. So he has some very interesting opinions. You know, I think none of the candidates running now want to legalize marijuana. That's a great idea. We should definitely legalize marijuana. Marijuana is good. Okay, and that's an interesting idea. I don't know how I feel about that idea, but it's an interesting idea to have the janitor with. It's hilarious. It's definitely an interesting idea. I'd have to do some more studying on it. I know how we hate studying, but it's an interesting idea, one that has not been heard of before. And then, he has very interesting ideas. A lot of stuff behind him is common sense solutions. Just like, why don't we just do that? Oh, wait, we're not. We should just do that. But definitely, he has some interesting ideas. Yeah, they, yeah, he wouldn't be the first movement. This wouldn't be the first movement to try to draft someone to run for president. They drafted Eisenhower, and he actually won. But it took twice. They had to try to draft him twice. So this may not be the election for him. This might be the election for him. I have no idea. I believe only 10,000 people have signed the petition to get him to run. But he's done it before. He raised $300,000, and he defeated a Democrat and a Republican who both raised $14 million and became governor. He became mayor. He beat the Democrat and Republican there. He has definitely demonstrated the ability to do it. And by being at 18% in the polls without being a candidate, if he's a candidate, that would probably skyrocket a little bit. And then they couldn't deny him access into the debates. And in the debates is where it really matters, because that's how he won the governor's race. He actually got his voice heard. Now, I definitely think he's the only one taking the climate seriously who would be running. Well, not